What's up, everyone? On this week's episode, we're joined by Austin Urban. He's the owner of the Bromley View Inn. He's a short-term rental investor, a real estate broker, and he also manages short-term rentals. I'm Jake Garay from the Garay team with Berkshire Hathaway, and you're listening to my podcast, Selling the Suburbs. I'm sitting down with real estate agents, investors, experts, and various professionals throughout the industry. On Selling the Suburbs, we're discussing the truth about real estate, entrepreneurship, and the ever-changing housing market. Take us back to how you got involved in real estate, right? So you have a background in banking and finance, you said, right?
Yep.
So kind of when did you become interested? Was it in college, before school, family? Like kind of where did it all begin and then how'd you get here?
Okay, so my original interest was probably during college. Just coming home, I had parents that had a little bit of involvement in real estate just on the side. So it always piqued my interest in that way. But the real interest started probably after college. I was working at a bank in Boston. I was there for about a year. Wasn't totally my type of style of work. I left the job, started working upstate. Got my real estate license. I actually got the license to list real estate that my dad and my uncle owned. So it was like kind of by accident.
This is literally my story.
And those were my first, my first listings were their listings, and my first sale was like my personal house.
Yeah.
But the idea of Airbnb and even long-term residential tenants was always something I had an interest in since I was in college. And as soon as I moved back to New York, my mindset was like, how do I get the first Airbnb? And just by default, it was always like trying to get my parents to do it with me or trying to get my brother to do it with me.
What year was this?
2016.
Okay, so this is Airbnb's kind of starting to gain momentum and popularity because what were they like?
2010?
Yeah, I was going to say, around there. So they're an established company. You're starting to hear about it more and more. And now it's like you're basically on the forefront of this because it really wasn't that popular, at least in New York back then.
Yeah, and I mean, unless you were in a place that was already a highly tourist, like transient location, it was especially not popular.
Yeah.
But
like a major city, like New York City or something like that.
Yeah. And kind of after failed attempt, I went to one of my friends that lives in Hudson, who was at the time looking to move out of his parents' house. And I was like, hey, well, let's buy a 2-unit together. We'll rent one side out full time. We'll live in the other, and we'll just rent it on Airbnb as much as we can. And that was, I think, 2018 is when that happened. And ever since then, it's just been
snowball.
Yeah, just snowballing. Next one, I own a couple properties with him, a couple properties with other people.
That's awesome.
Kind of the same idea.
So kind of take us through because I think there's a distinction between obviously when you own a long-term tenant, or a long-term rental, I should say, versus a short-term rental, right? So what would you say are the biggest differences between the management side of those two things?
The biggest thing I do management-wise for Airbnbs is scheduling cleanings, which is crazy to think about. And a lot of regular maintenance that you don't necessarily do with a long-term tenant. Cleanings, like I was doing it before I got here. I'm like, especially before a busy 3 weeks for foliage or busy ski season weekends and stuff like that. Once you have a ton of properties under management, you need to make sure that people are showing up to clean houses. They're ready. The instructions are out. The beds are made. The floors are vacuumed. Everything is ready to go because the expectation is high. Whereas with a long-term tenant, it's really just kind of keeping in contact with them. You make sure the rent's paid and they make sure that they are getting what they pay for.
Yeah.
So something breaks, they send in a request and I just get it on the calendar to get it fixed. It's usually not quite that simple, but
it sounds easier than it is.
It's just a very different interaction when you're going to commit to somebody for a year versus commit to somebody for a weekend. So the expectations are different. The planning is different.
And how much involvement do you have? Obviously now you've grown this, you've scaled your business. But let's just say first couple Airbnbs that you purchased, how involved are you in the day-to-day? Because I hear so many clients when they ask or they are thinking about Airbnb, it sounds great, right? The concept, the relationships that you have, The income, obviously, in a lot of ways is superior, but people are always worried about the management. So in the beginning stages, how did you kind of handle that? How did you, were you there every day doing it yourself? Like, kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, the first apartment that my friend and I got and started Airbnb together, we didn't have a cleaning service. We would just clean it ourselves. Luckily, the people we were renting to very often would leave the place pretty clean. So we used to joke around and be like, we're getting paid to just remake the beds. The first floor was always in pretty good shape, the common areas. But as it grew, you definitely need to start coming up with a system, whether it's detailed Excel sheets for scheduling, or which is actually what I do, or using some of the cleaning apps and maintenance apps and stuff like that. I haven't actually delegated any of the management side away from my properties. I kind of went the other way and started taking on other people's properties, and I am that person that people go to now. But it's very involved, and it's quite often people think it's not going to be, and then 2 months later they call me back like, wait, I can't do this.
Yeah, well, and that's why I ask, because I know that it is heavily involved, and as you said before, it's about the experience for that person. They have high expectations, so if you don't deliver on that experience, whether it's they have issues or something isn't up to what their expectation is, then you're going to get a bad review, and that's like death in short-term rentals. So you talked a little bit about systematizing. Kind of like, how did you start that? So you systematized your cleaning, you mentioned Excel spreadsheets and different tools. Like, how much of it is systematizing your business so that you can grow? Because obviously you've grown very quickly in just 4 or 5 years. Most people aren't able to do that. So how much of it is just systematizing and having a good, kind of method to that?
Yeah. So at this point, a year ago on Airbnb, I think I had like 11 or 12 listings combined of my own and other people's. Right now I have 30.
Oh my God.
So it ramped up really quick, and I'm still a one-man show, but I have a Rolodex of cleaners and maintenance people and everybody.
Do you have any in-house staff or anything like that? It's literally just you.
It's just me. I'm the only one on the payroll, so to speak, right now. That being said, I think very soon some type of back-end admin person will get into the mix. I'm kind of right at that threshold where it's going to start to make sense to scale any further. But the systems are important. Cleaning, like I said, I kind of break down all of the listings geographically in Excel sheets. I have very simple calendars. Typically, every Monday, I go through every single one, make sure they're all accurate, and then send them off to the cleaners and get confirmations on dates that weren't already confirmed, and just double confirm the ones that are. I color code things so that they know if cleaner or owners are showing up as the next guests. If they're within a 24-hour time frame that they have to clean in, if either it's same day or they're coming the day after, because sometimes if there's a week in between, you can go in, clean the garbage out, and then go back and do all the laundry and stuff like that. Maintenance, I actually have a free to-do list app that I use, Microsoft To Do. It's very basic, and I've got a couple handyman guys that are go-to that I've just lucked out with. They're hard to find this good and this reliable, but I have them on that app as well, and I assign tasks to them by house, and they kind of just show up and knock them out.
So you've got a really good system down as to...
Yeah, I mean, I take advantage of a little bit of the software and technology that's out there, but I mean, I see stuff on Instagram and other social media platforms all the time where it's like some people just like step away from the computer and it's like this cleaning software, this maintenance software, this, and it's like you don't touch it all.
Sometimes I feel like that stuff becomes too much.
It can, and it's a two-way street with that stuff. Like if you have a cleaner, like I have a couple that are a little bit older and like it's
not as familiar with that.
Like they don't even like getting the schedules texted to them. They would rather get emailed.
Right.
So like, okay, well then that app is out the window. They're not going to use it. So I try to do something that worked for everybody, including myself, and these were kind of the avenues that I used.
So for kind of looking at the acquisition side now.
Yeah.
When you go and you're identifying properties, right? You kind of got the system down, you're out looking at new properties to purchase. How do you determine if, well, let me ask you this first. Is every property a candidate for Airbnb?
No.
So how do you determine, like, what are the criteria where you say, is it town based? Is it like what's going on in the specific street? Is it the property, different elements of the property itself? Like how do you kind of qualify or disqualify if something is a good short-term rental?
So the first thing I would look at is different things qualify a house depending on where it is. I mean, I'm not qualifying a house in the middle of Hudson the same way I am in Southern Vermont. That being said, I do look for a few things that are kind of either by house or by area. Seasonality for me is always the biggest thing. If you can get, I sometimes say 2.5 seasons, like 2 seasons that are pretty good, and then somewhere in there's like a foliage season where it's good for like a month. If you can find that, that's typically pretty good, which most of the Northeast actually has. And then I look for attractions around the area. Skiing, rail trail, shopping, food is a huge thing. Things like that draw people in. Although sometimes being out in the middle of nowhere, some
Can
people
be an
like
appeal.
that. But for example, being off the Amtrak with tons of New York City chef restaurants and shopping in Hudson has proven to be pretty good.
How do you look at them like through the lens of like different lifestyles, like different types of clientele? So for example, like someone who goes to say Hudson is looking for more of that urban type feel. They're going for the restaurants, the shopping, versus that person who does want to just be in the middle of nowhere. Don't talk to me. I just want privacy and just like peace and tranquility for a few days. Like, do you look at those two different elements?
I do, especially when setting the place up. Like for example, if somebody's going to go to a house in the middle of the woods, I've got a place with a friend, pretty close to Manchester, Vermont, but it's on a dead end street. You can't see another house from it. It's got an awesome fireplace. It's got great outdoor lighting, seating, table, a grill. Like it's got a bunch of amenities, hot tub, stuff like that. It's on the edge of a creek. It's got a little walking trail. So stuff like that, if you're going to go out in the middle of nowhere and expect to be busy or doing things.
Yeah, you're
out
kind of
there,
self-contained on the property.
You don't just want a bench and
Right.
be out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
So a little bit of the extras go a long way out there. A fireplace inside, a hammock, a lot of things that aren't super expensive can make the middle of nowhere houses pretty good.
So you talked about geographically, you're in a bunch of different markets. What markets are you in? Like what drew you to them? Kind of talk us through that.
So the ones that I own in and manage in mostly are Copake Lake, Hudson, Hunter, Saratoga, Southern Vermont. There are a few that are kind of in between those towns that feed off the rental capacity of them. Copake Lake was kind of by default. I grew up there. I grew up in Poughkeepsie, but I grew up there with my parents having a second home with our aunt and uncle near the lake. So that was kind of by default. Hudson, I gravitated that way just because when I was looking to move back to New York, that's where my friend group was. And then I'll be honest, I got a little bit lucky that it just happened to be like the town that exploded around the same time that I was looking to move there. Hunter, I ended up there because I sold a house to people that that wanted to put it on Airbnb and VRBO, and they needed a manager, and that's actually how I got into management.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah, so that was the first non-owned or non-family house. They bought the house. I actually brought it to their attention, thinking it would be a great rental, but took it over for them and then started renting it. I don't even think all of the owners have seen it to this day. I think 3 of the 4. And then Saratoga, again, just kind of identified that there was a draw there, the famous racetrack, a big lake. It's not very far from the Vermont or upstate New York ski mountains, and a good crowd in the fall.
So I can see what you mean now with like the 2.5 season type thing, right? Because you take a market like Saratoga and they've got the summer, they've got the racetrack, they've got, the lakes and everything like that. They've got the town, but then in the wintertime, like you said, you get the ski mountains, you get that type of element to it. And obviously this time of year in the fall, people are up there for the foliage and everything like that. So there's kind of like, you don't have that one season that you see in so many other areas and regions where it's like you get one season, then everything shuts down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I remember growing up, we had a house in Lake George, and very similar to Saratoga in a lot of ways, very busy in the summer. And you did have an element of like, you were close to the ski mountains, but the town itself was dead. And we always said, like, why wouldn't they stay open? You know, you get the lake, they do the winter carnival, the lake freezes over. There's so many different things up there. And my parents ended up selling that house back in 2013. Of course, now we look back and we're like, that would have been the greatest, you know, vacation rental. But at that time, it was like just in the beginning of Airbnb, and there was like VRBO and all these different things, but like it not widely as accepted as it is now, where like the psychology of it now is like, oh yeah, absolutely, it's a no-brainer, but it was so early on. And of course, in retrospect, you look back and you're like, oh, it would have been a great idea, but so many of those areas just shut down for that season, and then it's like, it just makes it so much harder to sustain.
We run into that with the Copac Lake rentals for sure, even though there is a small ski mountain there and you can go out and shovel snow and ice skate on the lake if it's frozen, stuff like that. But I always joke around in the winter, like you look off your deck if you're on the lake and you don't see a light on. So it's quiet.
Yeah.
The closest thing is Hudson, 25 minutes away.
Yeah.
So I typically try to find a 3, 4, 5 month rental to kind of bridge that gap, which I factor into that 2.5 seasons. If you can find that person, like if there's any draw at all, I still count it as that's part of the seasonality of the place.
So now you're getting a little bit into like the financial aspects, right? So when you go and you underwrite a deal, how are you determining, like, how do you come up with a price per night, or how do you even run the numbers on these things? Because it's so hard to know if it's not operating as an Airbnb already, and you're not like yourself who knows these markets and knows. How do you even determine, like, oh yeah, this is $199 a night or $149 a night, or how do you do that?
So I do a couple things. One, I mean, you can use AirDNA and a couple other different websites that just kind of pull all this data from Airbnb and VRBO and compile it, and you can do your own research on what other houses that are similar are doing, or apartments or whatever it may be. I sometimes just get on and I just look what's actually around me right there, and not within a 10-mile radius. I mean, like, who else is in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Like literally like 4 houses away. What are they doing? What's their calendar look like for the next 3 months? That's typically how far people are booking out, depending on the season. But and I'll pull 5 or 10 just neighbors that have comps. I mean, almost the same way you do with traditional real estate listing to figure out the price. And then I always tell partners or clients, I mean, pricing is a spectrum. There's going to be Wednesdays in the off season that are 25% of what the rack rate on a Saturday is in peak season. I think the biggest swing I see is Saratoga track season and like the middle of winter up there. Like the weekday price in February versus what you get on a Saturday for Travers weekend up there is 5x. So it's like there's not one price, and it's not like we're gonna pick one price and then draw everything back. I price for the whole year, so the different seasons are different prices.
So you'll actually, when you're doing your underwriting up front, you'll actually like say like, this is what I'm expecting for these seasons.
Correct.
And these. That's smart. I've never thought of it that way.
I'll do 4 kind of different pricing, or if some seasons I think are going to be very close, I'll bundle them. But it's not just like, this is the weekend rate, this is the weekday rate, this is the expected occupancy, here's the revenue for the year. It's a little bit more broken out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, you should price in that seasonality, especially, I mean, that's literally what the entire business is based off
exactly.
of. So what do you see as, kind of getting into the minutia a little bit, like occupancy rates? Obviously they vary, but like, what do you say is like a goal occupancy rate for most? What should it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one thing I'm seeing right now is occupancy is just highly correlated to how much you're pricing your place correctly and moving your prices around. There's a lot of missed opportunity I see by hosts, and this is something I tell hosts or owners that are clients of mine. That's one of the best things I do. I don't just like throw you on price labs and like let the software do the thing. I'm actually making sure you're priced properly and getting full as a result. I think somewhere in like the 40s to 50% range would be a pretty good goal. Yeah. But if you don't have that 2.5, 3 seasons, it's really hard to get there. And you're mostly doing it on Thursdays to Mondays.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. So kind of looking at, actually, I want to ask you about something else, because obviously you've got the short-term rentals. Airbnb is based on this idea of, bed and breakfast, everything like that. Talk to me through, how do you go from buying Airbnbs to buying an inn?
This is a great story, and it's funny that this is coming up now because I think what would be the 2-year anniversary of my business partner and best friend Dan, who owns the Bromley View Inn with me. He sent me the text as a joke originally, like, "Hey, I found the next property," and we still to this day talk about this day. And it was October 8th, 2 years ago, actually. So it's
pretty damn close, yeah.
And I think the contact photo for me in his phone is a screenshot of the conversation of him sending me the listing. And he sent it to me and was like, "Hey, I found the next Airbnb," as a joke, because we had a property down the road. We got it for a great deal right before COVID. It was in February of 2020, so before everything kind of shot through the roof. And we were looking for another one because it was doing well. We both love the area. It's got the seasonality, maybe the best out of anything I managed, to be honest. It's got a great summer draw, great foliage draw, huge winter draw,
Yep.
obviously. So we were looking, and everything was so overpriced. And at that time, nobody wanted to get into hospitality because everything was closed,
Right.
including
That's
this
true.
place.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
So he sent it to me, and I was like, and it was advertised as, buy this old ski inn or lodge and use it as a big ski house for you and your family or multiple families. And I sent it back to him. I was like, "Yeah, let's do this. Let's go up and we'll talk to the owners and see what the numbers look like."
And he was like, "Oh shit, I was
went
kidding."
Up, yeah. And here's the craziest parts. He lived in Los Angeles at the time, and he hadn't seen the place in person until the day we closed. He showed up, wrote his name down on the signing documents, and then I gave him a tour. So he just like fully dove in just because I went up and was
He
like,
trusted you.
Yeah, exactly. But I went up there, I got a tour with the owner. I learned a little bit about the story that they had and the previous owners. I found out there was this pretty cool history of the place, opening in the late 50s under a different name, changed names to the Bromley View Inn. And it had only had a handful of owners over the years, over whatever, 70 years. And the owners that we bought it from had owned it for 25 years. A couple that ran it themselves, a little bit of part-time help here and there, but they kind of just ran it as their own like house. Like
Yeah.
They lived upstairs and they were the staff. They cooked the breakfast, they cleaned the beds.
Like a literal bed and breakfast.
Yeah, so we looked at it. We did a 2 or 3 hour tour of the place. I talked to him about the way the operations work and what the finances look like, asked a bunch of questions. And I walked out of the front door. I wasn't even in my car, and I texted Dan and I was like, "Hey, we're putting an offer in on this place." I was like, "I'm doing it whether you're in or not." But like, you sent it to me, and I know he works super hard. And he was like, "Yeah, I'll move back in a month." And I'll
Really? He moved back?
He subletted his place, moved back, and he and I moved in there Christmas Day.
Wow.
We drove up and we started running the place. It was madness behind the scenes for months.
I can't even imagine. Like, where do you even start?
So the tough part about it is that the owners were the ones that ran it. So we got one.
You didn't inherit anybody.
We got one girl that worked a couple days a week, and she would help strip beds and clean bathrooms and stuff like that, some general stuff. And we get up there, and I swear we close, and I get the keys from the owner, and he walks out, and I looked at Dan, and I was like, "So what do we do?" And we closed on the 22nd. What's crazy is we actually both had family Christmas plans. So we left the place with guests in it, kind of called all the guests that were going to be there for the next few days, and just gave them, we closed a month earlier than we thought we were going to. And which actually I'll explain after this, but ended up being very good for us. But we just left the place empty, called all the guests, told them what the deal was, and we're like, "We'll see you Christmas night." We left, came back, we left all their keys out. And then we got up there. We lived there for 3 months. We slept in the finished attic for 3 months,
God.
college dorm room style. And we cooked breakfast. We made beds, vacuumed hallways, bartended, started fires for people. I mean, we did everything there was.
That's insane.
With full-time jobs.
I see, that to me is awesome, because you talk to people all the time. They're like, "Oh, you want to be successful, do X, Y, and Z." And you hear stories like that. And so many people like say that they want to do these types of things, but no one's actually willing to do that. Like to go and sleep in an attic and, go from doing, all these, you're selling real estate, you're managing real estate, you're doing a million different things. And then you're like, "Yeah, sure, I'll just do this on the side and do this basically work what, 2 or 3 full-time jobs at that time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that took up a lot of our day until we hired staff. It was, and at the same time, we're learning and we're making the mistakes and we're building out new listings and setting up rooms a little bit differently and figuring out, like, I didn't even know where all the electrical panels were in the building until 3 months in. It was just like, it happened so quick, and we weren't there running it prior, that you just had no other option other than like figure it out.
You just have to. I mean, and I think that's so true for investors in general, right? Like, so many people want to know everything. You say like analysis paralysis, right? Sometimes you got to just buy the damn thing and figure it out.
Just jump in.
And you'll figure it out as things go.
Yeah.
Why did you say it was better that you closed early?
So we actually, and this is great for buying, I guess, any short-term or seasonal property, like an Airbnb or hospitality. But we closed, and we actually, I didn't even think about this when we were doing the process, and now it's all I kind of look for while I'm looking for, because we are looking for other similar hospitality properties. But we closed, and we got the 50% deposits for all of the bookings through or into the future, which was a 6-month window at the time. Now we book a year out. But we got all this money that was sitting in their account for bookings that hadn't happened yet, that at closing, we actually got a bunch of money back to put in the account, which for us was operating money in the beginning.
Right.
It wasn't like we put it in our pockets and walked out the door.
Right.
We actually, to this day, have not paid ourselves out of that place, but a lot of sweat.
The joys of owning your own business.
And free breakfast.
But,
But that was like just a little bit of starting cash that, had we not had that and had we closed in like April at the end of winter, it would have been pretty tough, or we would have been putting it in ourselves.
That's right. Yeah, because you didn't have that busy season coming up, right? No, that makes sense. You don't even think about that. What are, like, I don't even know where to start with like an inn. Like, what are the differences? How are you renting it out? Like, do you have anything there that you put on Airbnb, or is it strictly, okay, so you do. So how does that work?
That's a question I get asked all the time too. The biggest difference is that, especially because we spend a lot of time there, like I'll go up there 3 out of 4 weekends a month in the winter. The biggest difference is I've done thousands of Airbnb or VRBO stays, and rarely do I actually meet and shake somebody's hand or talk to them or tell them the story face to face. Whereas that first winter up at the inn, I met everybody.
Yeah.
And there are people that stayed with us that have my personal cell phone that I still talk to when they come back. I know their names, I know their faces, I know their kids. So they're both personal in some aspect, but it's much more personal up there.
More face to face.
Now that we're not up there quite as much, it's still as face to face, just with our staff. So it's something you think about when it's not just somebody cleaning bedrooms. They show up and they interact with our guests, and they bartend for us sometimes, and they're there in the morning cooking breakfast. So there's a face behind the property.
Yeah. I mean, Airbnbs are already experience-based. This sounds like it's 100 times that.
Yeah, it
like
is.
It's because they're really there the whole time. Like, just, and you've got staff that you're trying to relay, like, this is how you talk to your customers and everything like that.
It's something we talk about all the time. It's just how to interact. Of course, like always, politeness, and not to get overly frustrated in some cases, because I don't care what property you have, there will be people that show up that test you.
Yeah. No matter what.
Yeah, no matter what.
That's just how people are.
And you know what? In some way, that's okay, but it's just about controlling yourself or your staff. The other big difference is that all the common areas are shared. So every guest at our
guest
place,
interaction.
Exactly. So. We actually just looked over a review with our 2 staff members the other day. There were people that left a negative review because they went into our lounge and somebody was reading a book in there, and they were worried about watching TV and playing pool. So it's like, you can't take a side there. It's like, they got to the lounge first, kind of thing.
That's tough.
We do ask that people in the lounge don't make a ton of noise, but also don't expect it to be a library. But there are a lot of things up there that are little quirks that you just don't expect. And every weekend's different.
I can imagine there's got to be all different types of scenario. I wouldn't even think of something like that. And how do you determine, how do you even determine, like, how do you handle that? Like, what did you do? You reach out to that person? Like,
we do respond to We try to respond to all reviews. I mean, we'll sometimes sit up there if it's a quiet Tuesday or Wednesday, or our staff do this now, and we just go through all of the last 2 months of booking reviews. And if it's a positive one, thanks for coming, look forward to having you back. If it's a negative one, address it, ask if we can do anything to fix it, something like that. We do it on Expedia, Booking, Google, all those sites.
So one of the questions that I really wanted to ask, because obviously I see everything you're doing online, follow you on Instagram, all that stuff. How much time or thought, if any at all, do you put into the brand that you're putting out there, whether it's with you personally, whether it's with your companies, whether it's with your Airbnbs? Like, is that part of the thought process, or is it kind of just like, hey, I think this is really cool, this is what works, and that's what you kind of go by?
I mean, specifically to Instagram and social media, I mean, the only thing I really think about is that, I mean, there's some consistency and inconsistency on there, because like one post is like a nice foliage photo, and the next one is like about evicting tenants, and the next one is about a new like Airbnb client or a house that I bought or something like that. The only brand thing I try to keep consistent on there is that like everybody knows I'm kind of doing something at all the time.
Right.
So, like every
you're always doing something.
Like, I mean, I think you actually got me to do something I haven't done for like my family or girlfriend or anything in a long time, which is turn my phone off for an hour and not look at it for an hour. But
it's hard.
I'm always trying to stay busy. I mean, even like I take phone calls on the chairlift, or like I'll be I play soccer every week and I'm on my phone answering Airbnb messages in between shifts or whatever. Yeah. So it's just kind of the brand of like always willing to work and like you can call me after 5 kind of mentality. As far as specific businesses like the Bromley View, when we're posting or talking about the place, we keep the brand in mind and try to just always have our minds around what the place is supposed to be when guests show up, and make sure we're explaining it as such, which is like up there, it's a clean, cozy, comfortable, friendly place to stay.
Yeah.
That's affordable.
Well, it definitely looks like it when you look at it online and you look at everything. So I think you're doing a good job with that.
Well, we bought the place thinking we were going to gut renovate it and try to find financing to just rip everything out. And then the first year, obviously we couldn't do that. We had hundreds of people already booked to stay. We started saying that because we opened the bar to the public, which was something else we did for the first time in 25 years there. And I think 99% of people were like, don't touch it.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, maybe like get the old like tag sale couch out of there, but like don't rip the walls down. We like the old paneling, put some old
charm and character.
Yeah, we put a sticker wall in the bar. It's like, so it feels like you're in this kind of old school little time capsule chalet ski lodge.
Yeah.
Which worked. It was a win-win for us because it was less expensive and people like it.
I feel like there's a big element to that. Like, you go to certain areas, you're going there, you're attracted to it for a certain reason, right? You go to New York City, it's a different experience than going to Hudson. You know what I mean? So that makes sense, and that's pretty cool. It's funny how some things are intentional and some things are accidental.
This whole place was accidental.
Yeah. Well, it started as a joke.
Yeah, it was 100% accidental. But
that's awesome.
It's worked out, and it's now that we're going into our third busy season, things are making sense, and it's starting.
You feel like you got a good system there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it seems like you have the system down with the Airbnbs, and I'm sure this was a process to figure out how do we systematize it.
Yeah. And we have our systems up there, and we have 2 great full-time employees. So I'm able to go back to my real job, which was part of the reason why I was able to go from 10 Airbnbs a year ago to 30 on my account now.
So what do you consider your real job?
The short-term rental manager.
Because sure. I've got like 5 different things.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, you brought it up before, side hustle. That you bought a marina. Is that what it was?
So 4 years ago, during COVID, I started renting pontoon boats on the side. Myself and a few others bought a marina up on Copake Lake pretty recently, which, similar to the inn, was kind of barely kind of grabbing its potential. It was, for what it's worth, it was basically a big building with a residence that the owner lived in at the time, which is now an Airbnb, and 50 slips. But this summer we opened it for a little while we fully renovated the bar restaurant. That'll open next year. Going to add an Airbnb, add a little general store, brought back the maintenance facility there to change a prop or winterize a boat, which we just leased out to somebody else. But it's starting to become a fully functioning place again.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that I just got a text on the way here about missing an email that was urgent from one of my partners that I need to answer. So it's a side hustle, but I hope by next year, I hope we've done what we did at the inn, which is staff it, oversee it, put some systems into place. Because right now it's just me and a Gmail account pretty much.
I was just going to say, I mean, with all these different things you have going on, this would be like a full-time thing for anybody else.
Yeah.
So how do you
running that marina could be a full-time job.
How do you balance all of that?
I do a lot of admin work, like sending emails or just really anything I can do on my own. I try to just do at night or like late hours or early morning or anything like that. I'll always joke around, like we'll watch Sunday football and I sit with my friends and there's 10 of us and I'm on my laptop watching the game and answering stuff or just doing little things. Even the little jobs add up. Scheduling a maintenance task or talking to another employee or whatever it might be, the small stuff adds up. So the more I can chip away at that stuff in the hours that are not talking to homeowners or talking to boat slip members or talking to the staff at the inn that requires some two-way communication, the better. So
no, it sounds like you got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, the days are busy. Yeah, for sure.
I can imagine.
I don't spend a lot of time not
doing something,
communicating or doing something productive.
Yeah. Well, that's good though. I mean, it's exciting, right? You got all this different stuff going on.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
And then on top of all of that, I know that you do some philanthropy work as well. So kind of tell us about, I know you're doing a million different things. So like, I know you have the Miles for MSA.
Yep, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
So that I started 4 years ago. And I started it because a family member of mine got diagnosed. It's a very rare neurological disease that falls under the Parkinson's umbrella, but is better explained as kind of almost similar to like an ALS. It's a neurological degenerative brain disease. 100% fatal, not a long prognosis. So it's so, I think the number is like about 30,000 diagnosed cases in the country. So extremely small and very rare and very underfunded as a result. The first I had heard about it was a family member getting it, and most of our family members' friends, that was the first time they heard about it. So I was kind of bored. It was right in the beginning of COVID. Everything was shut down. Like you couldn't do real estate showings. People weren't going to Airbnbs. I mean, nothing was going on. It was mid-April of 2020. I had actually just got diagnosed with COVID. I had a positive test, and then my dad got it, my mom got it. We were all trapped in this house together because my brother didn't get it, so he couldn't visit us, and we're like in our lake house.
The good old quarantine days.
In our lake house with the food that we could get at the grocery store when it was open for like 2 hours a day kind of thing. Yeah. So we were bored, and I'm a pretty physically active person. I run a lot, bike a lot, go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. And I was like, all right, well, how can I stay busy and do something good? And I've always had a pretty philanthropic background. My parents have always been that way and taught my brother and I to be that way. So I was like, I'm going to start a running fundraiser. Mm-hmm. I'm going to run 100 miles in the month of May. And I'm going to just try to get dollars per mile donations. So I did it the first year. Because of the confidentiality of it with our family member, I was only able to reach out to close friends and family. But they were super receptive of it. It was just me running alone, raised, I think, just under $15,000.
Wow.
In the first year. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, and then as the years went on, with permission, expanded it out to a larger network and got more people involved running. So the second year, I think I had about a dozen people running, and I started doing it not just in May. I did it so that the final day, which we do an event on where everybody does the last mile together and donors and family members and stuff can come together, and we do drinks and music and hang out, and you can walk or run it. So I did it so it falls on a Saturday. So now you start somewhere in April, but it's 30 days. You run 100 miles, bike 300. I do both. A couple others do both, but you do one or the other. You raise money throughout the month. And the second year, we got 70,000. The third year, we got 100.
Oh my God.
We got like 110, and this past year we did 138,000, and
That's
40
insane.
runners or bikers. So we've raised 300 plus for the organization is called the MSA Coalition. It's the largest and I believe maybe the only nonprofit around the condition. But that's the biggest and fastest growing event that I've been a part of.
That's incredible.
But yeah, we got some incredible friends and family that spend a lot of time running. But I mean, nobody realizes it, but like if you're trying to do this every day, like 3 miles a day, especially if you're not a runner, adds up. And if you miss a day, the next 3 days are 4 mile days, and you miss one of those days, it just
That's a lot of running.
Yeah, it's if you're not an active runner and used to it. I mean, I know people start and don't complete it every year.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do you know that will just get up and run 100 miles in a month?
Yeah, not many.
Not many.
No, not many. But you know what? I have some. It's actually amazing to me to see how people I like was barely friends with or just had a friendly relationship with at the beginning decided to do it, and we were talking the whole time. Some local friends in Hudson that decided to do it, and we'd run together, and now we're like best friends. Or I'll see him out, and I'd be like, I passed a state trooper yesterday with one of my friends, and I was like, oh, she does the Miles for MSA event, and he was like,
awesome.
Oh, no way.
That's cool. So you've created a sense of community around it too.
And we still have a group chat for it, and we're gonna fire it up again next May, and it's become a pretty cool event.
That's awesome. So on top of everything else, you do take that on too. Yeah. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, the other involvement in any volunteer stuff that I do is not nearly as much of a time commitment or just
when you're not considering taking the guys out and searching for missing children.
Yeah, that I would have missed that today.
That's insane. No, it's really cool to see how involved you are in the community, and I know that you put a lot out there too on social media for anybody who follows you. I know you do a lot with telling everybody they could always reach out if they need someone to talk to, and it's nice to see people who give back, because so many times, especially you have every excuse not to do that, right? I mean, you're super busy, as we just heard about, and you still make it a point to do that for everybody. I think that's very honorable, and I think we'd be in a much better place as a society if everybody would kind of take that approach.
I think if everybody gave even an hour a week to something charitable or nonprofit related, it goes a long way.
Yeah. It's cool to see. And as a third party who's witnessed it, it's really it's awesome. So I commend you for that.
Yeah, the only other one that I helped found was and it's, I mean, we kind of stole the idea from many other charities, but I've got a volunteer firefighter friend in Hudson that I actually didn't know that all the Columbia County firefighters were volunteers until he and I became friends, and I moved up there full time. And I think he just said it one day in conversation. And
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And I think 4 or 5 years ago, we started doing a 9/11 stair climb where we put on the full gear, 100 pounds of helmet, jacket, pants, boots, whatever, gloves, tank, all that stuff. And we just go to the gym and we do 110 flights of stairs, and same deal, raise money, just contact our friends, family, start a GoFundMe, give a little bit of merch to anybody that donates. You get a shirt or a glass or whatever.
That's cool.
But that's raised, anywhere from like 3,000 in its first year to like 20,000, and there's probably a dozen people that did it.
Wow.
Most recently.
That's awesome.
So that's another good one. And that one goes back right to like the hometown community. So we take the donations and each person does it in their local fire department.
Oh, that's cool.
And most of the people doing it aren't firefighters, which is really cool. So they're going to their local fire department, explaining it, meeting the people, getting the gear, borrowing it, and then bringing it back. So it's a cool way to I've always just had so much respect for first responders. So throughout that event, I always tell people, if you're not going to do this, just go to the firehouse and meet them.
Right.
Just go say hello.
No, I think that's so important for people to get out and know the people in their community like that. I mean, that's the person that could potentially save your life one day.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and it's such a thankless job in so many ways. All first responders, right? I mean, everything that we do pales in comparison to what they go through on a daily basis.
I can go sign up to be a volunteer firefighter today, and I'm not running in a burning building. And
no.
I know many people that will, and they won't even know the people in there.
That's crazy.
So, but that's why you do it.
Yeah. So No, well, I'm glad that we got to do this. I don't want to take up too much of your time. You're a busy man. Where can people find you? How can they, social media? What's the best way to if people want to
So
get in touch?
I've got a website. It's just austinurbanrealestate.com, and then an Instagram, realestate_urban. And I'm very responsive on either. There's a contact me page on the website, and you DM me on Instagram, you're probably going to hear back within hours.
Awesome.
So that's the best way.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for coming. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, look forward to it.